I'm here with Caroline Voaden on the phone, author of a wonderful book, If There's Anything I Can Do, which is a book of advice on how to help somebody who has been bereaved. So, Caroline, welcome.
Hello.
Tell me, this is a book that is to help people, like most of the audience, people who've not been bereaved. And it seems tailor-made for a crisis, a pandemic like this. But that's not why you wrote it, was it? What brought you to publishing the book?
Well, I initially published the book in 2007, and I wrote it after my husband died of cancer. So he was just 42 when he died, and I was only 34. And we had two little girls who were 1 and 3. And I was the only person I knew who was widowed in their 30s. And it was just something completely unheard of. And none of my friends knew what to do or what to say. And I felt like I was the only person in the world this had ever happened to. And obviously I'm not. And as the book explains, I ended up becoming friends with lots and lots of other people who were in the same boat. So I wrote the book originally to try and give some advice to those people who are around somebody who's been widowed or bereaved. So it's mainly aimed at people who've lost a partner, but also could be somebody who'd maybe lost a child or a sibling that they were very close to. So it's, a really close bereavement, the kind of bereavement that just totally, utterly rocks your world. And then, well, I was working in Brussels as an MEP and came home in January, and the book had gone out of print and has never been available on Kindle. And then we went into the pandemic, and there was all this discussion on the radio and the television about how many people were going to die and how suddenly bereavement seemed to be all over the place. And I thought it would be a good time to put the book on Kindle. I still feel it's a really useful book for people to read. And so I republished it. And before republishing it, I wrote a new chapter at the end of the book, which talks about where I am now compared to where I was when I first wrote it.
Yes.
And sort of gives a bit of perspective on how things have changed over 15 years and how it feels different now and how different my life is now.
Which is, it is actually very optimistic, that chapter. How far into bereavement were you when you first wrote the book? How many years had passed?
Well, it was exactly 4 years after Nick died that it came out. So I suppose maybe 2.5 to 3 years when I started writing it. And funnily enough, it was prompted by a friend who said so many awful, harsh, callous things to me that I just one day I just thought, I've had enough of this. You need to know that you can't say these things. It's not helpful. You're not helping me get over it. I mean, he kept telling me, you've got to get over it. You've got to stop crying. Nobody wants to see someone who's crying all the time. And I just thought, that's really not helpful. If anything, it's making me worse. And as I say, I knew a lot of other young widowed people because I joined this amazing organisation called Widowed and Young, which is a national support group for people who are bereaved under 50, well, including 50. And through them, I met dozens and dozens, hundreds of other people who were in the same boat. And there was a very strange but beautiful kind of camaraderie that we'd all been through this. And we used to sit and chat about the good things and the rubbish things that our friends were doing or saying to help us and support us. And some people had friends who were absolutely brilliant, and some people had friends who were just unbelievably bad.
And the voices in the book really add a good dimension, because you tell your story, you don't labour the grief, but you're very clear and it's very moving. But also having all these other voices giving their perspective on the same experience is extremely moving and very practical, because you do give practical advice. Now, the first part of the book seems to be not practical, but sensible advice about what people on the outside can expect from somebody who is bereaved. Do you think people sometimes expect too much, like your friend?
I think people have all sorts of unrealistic expectations. You know, people have read and heard about this 5 stages of grief. So they kind of expect you to go through that in a process. You know, so first of all, there's denial, and then there's anger, and then there's acceptance. You know, it doesn't really happen like that. it's like waves, it comes and it goes, and some days it's overwhelmingly awful and some days you're absolutely fine, and then you can be in a shop and a song comes on the radio and it can totally floor you because that might have been your favorite song, or all these things that are unpredictable and you never quite know when it's going to hit you, and I think people find that very difficult to cope with, rightly so, because it is difficult. And you've got this friend who might have always been, completely sort of stable and predictable, and then suddenly they're all over the place. And a lot of people expect that to just last for a few months. I think what shocked me more than anything was how long it went on for. Obviously, the intensity of it subsides over time. But 2, 3, 4 years later, 5 years later, I still had times when I really struggled. Although those times get shorter and possibly less intense, but they do still happen. And 17 years after he died, there are moments when it's my head's full of it, and it's like, oh, this is still really sad.
Yes. And you talk about triggers. Tell me about the supermarket. You had an experience with the food stuff, and a number of the other voices in the book echo favorite foods, echo that slightly surprising trigger.
Yeah, so food is a massive thing, and in fact I devoted a whole chapter of the book to food. Food is a very social thing, and then suddenly you're eating on your own, and there's no fun in that, and it takes a lot of getting used to, and you can't be bothered, and why should I bother cooking, it's just me eating, and so all of those things. And so Nick was a really big fan of fish. He loved eating fish, and I always struggled with sort of cooking fish. I've never been very confident about cooking fish, and I don't particularly like it. I do much more now than I did then, but I do remember being in the supermarket, going up to the fish counter thinking, oh, what shall I get? And then thinking, I don't have to buy fish anymore because he's not here. And it's such a tiny little thing, but that it really, really hits you that, oh, this is something we shared, and now we're never going to again. I'm never going to have to cook him fish again. But now I want to cook him fish, and he's not here, and I can't cook him fish.
You're going to have me crying in a minute. Sorry. Oh dear. So let's come back to the advice. Come on, I don't want the audience to be completely in tears before we get to the end. You do give practical advice as well to the people on the outside, to the friends.
So that's the whole point, really, is what can you do to make it better?
And at the beginning of the book, you give super practical advice, especially for someone who's got children. And toward the end of the book, you talk about how to write a card and what sort of card to send.
Condolence letters are really hard. I find them really hard. I suggested that, obviously this is not a rule, but it was my suggestion, that you don't buy one of those schmaltzy cards, that you just write a letter, because that's the most, people don't write letters anymore. So it's actually really lovely to get a letter. And what did I suggest? Things like just saying, I'm really sorry, because that's what they want to hear. Use the name of the person who has died, and that goes for conversation as well. It's really important to keep talking about somebody who's died, because the worst thing for someone who's bereaved is to think that everybody else has forgotten that person. So you mustn't go around thinking, oh, I can't mention their name because that'll upset my friend. Your friend's probably pretty upset already. So I said, in a letter, you could recount an anecdote of a happy time that you spent with this person, or maybe enclose a photograph that you've got, because often you'll have photographs that your friend will never have seen. So that can be really nice. Don't promise things you won't deliver. So don't say you'll always be there to help if you've got no intention of doing that. And be careful what you say about God. So I think telling someone that it's what God's wanted or it's God's will is not very helpful, and nobody really knows if that's true. And also another classic thing was, remember to write really clearly who you are, because I had a couple of letters with scribbled signatures at the bottom, and I had absolutely no idea who they were. Never found out who they were from. And remember that this person is grieving as well, so there'll be even less able to figure these things out. So, you know, if you're not known really clearly to this person, then, you know, make sure you say who you are. And the other thing is, let's say you work with somebody whose partner dies and you've never met the partner. It's still okay to write or send a card or a letter, and you can say, you know, I never met your husband, but I remember how beautifully you spoke about him, or, you know, it always struck me that you had a lovely relationship, or just something that you've picked up about their relationship, you know, from working with this person day in, day out. And that's, you know, the point is that you're writing the card for them, and it doesn't matter that you actually never met the person who died.
You also talked about timing. You were clear that actual timing doesn't matter so much.
No, I don't think it does. And I think it's fine to send a condolence card 2 or 3 weeks later, because one of the weird things is that you get used to them coming, and in a weird sort of way, you look forward to the post because you want to know who else has written to you, and then suddenly they stop, and that's horrible. And then it's like, oh, okay, everyone's moved on. And, you know, so it really doesn't matter. I think, you know, even if it's a bit late, it's fine.
And also, you talk about remembering anniversaries. One might think that that's personal, that it's for the family, it's for the person who is bereaved. But actually, you were saying that just knowing other people still remember, that seemed to be a very sensitive point, a very lovely thought.
There was one particular friend of Nick's who used to text me every year. I mean, for at least 10 years, they just sent a text and say, you know, we're thinking about Nick today as well, and we really miss him. We still miss him. And so Nick was a journalist for Reuters, and this guy worked with him. And you know, over the years, Dan has mentioned all the things that he'd love to be talking to Nick about, you know, Trump and all this stuff. It's just really nice to know that other people still remember, because of course people do, but they don't let you know.
Yeah, but they don't let you know. So you were going to read something from the book.
Yeah, so what I thought I would read is the top things not to say to someone who's been widowed, and the best things that you can say, because this kind of sums up the ethos of the book, really. So, top things not to say to someone who's been widowed, and why. I know how you feel. If you haven't been widowed, you simply don't know how it feels. At least he had a good innings. You're being so brave. Call me if you need anything. When my uncle died, when my granny got cancer, when I got divorced, etc., it's just not the same. You have to move on, get over it. You should put your grief away. You should be resting, taking it easy, being kind to yourself. That's quite difficult if you're now a single parent. Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the crucial things is this: call me if you need anything. So the title of the book is If There's Anything I Can Do, because people often write that in a card. Oh, if there's anything I can do, just let me know. Right. So the most important basic thing to understand about somebody who has been through a horrible bereavement is that they are in absolutely no fit state to pick up the phone to someone else and ask for help, because most of the time they don't actually know what they want. And even if they did, they would be embarrassed to ask, because we just don't ask for help in our culture. So you need to offer. You need to offer things that you are comfortable doing and happy to do. So that could be anything from, you know, would you like me to come and cut your hedge? I can see it's getting a bit overgrown. Shall I just cut it for you? Yes, please. You know, there are 5 light bulbs out in your house. Just shall I replace them for you? That would be great, thanks. To things like, you know, you've got kids who play in the same football club every Sunday morning. Well, you know, you could say, I'll take your son to football next Sunday, so you don't have to get dressed and leave the house. You can just have a quiet morning. You know, I'll come and pick him up, I'll take him to football, and I'll bring him home. And even better, I'll give him lunch before I bring him home. So then your friend isn't asking you for a favour, you're just offering, because actually it's no extra hassle for you to do it. So you just, you know, it's that kind of thing. So it's just being really upfront about, this is what I feel comfortable doing, and I'll do it for you. I'm going to the supermarket. Can I get you anything? And I think
so simple, but not obvious.
Yeah. And I think maybe having been through coronavirus, maybe we're all a little bit more plugged into that kind of, you know, because we've been looking out for our neighbours a bit, haven't we, and offering to do shopping and things like that. So maybe this is going to become a bit more normal.
So
And then
tell me the best things.
So the best things you can possibly say. I'd like to do something to help. Give me a job. I can only imagine how hard it is, how awful you feel. I miss him too. Spend Sunday with us. We'd love to have you. I remember when. Tell stories about the person who's died. He'd be really proud of you. I'm going to take the children out for the whole day. You're doing a great job. Shall I come round and bring dinner with me? I'll do the driving. I'm so very sorry.
Yes. It floors you rather.
Hmm.
So tell us again, Wade, tell me more about Widowed and Young.
Yes, fantastic organisation, widowedandyoung.org.uk. It is a national support group, so it's a self-help group. It's all run by volunteers, and there are local groups all over the country. And obviously things are different because of coronavirus, but in normal times they meet up, they go for walks, they have drinks in the pub, they go for Sunday lunch, and there are lots and lots of holidays and trips and things like that. And it may seem really, really weird, the thought of going away for a weekend with a bunch of other widowed people, but believe me, it's the best fun you'll have. It can be really, really draining to be around all your sort of normal friends who are all still in couples and all still happy when your world's been totally shattered. So there's something really comforting about just being with a bunch of other people who've been through the same experience. And it doesn't mean you all sit and cry, because you really don't. There's a lot of laughter, but you don't have to pretend to be anything you're not. And if you're having a bad day and you're struggling, then everybody just totally gets it. So I know that they've had lots of new members this summer because of COVID, which is quite sobering.
Yes. What I will do is make sure we put the website, the URL for Widowed and Young, on the notes that go with the interview. And we'll also put a link to the book. And thank you, Caroline, for talking to us today. And thank you for writing it. It's a really thoughtful, sensitive book. I almost feel that every human should read it, just to so a bit better about being
I'd
human.
love every human to read it. Thank you, Judith. It's been really good to talk about it.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.